You quit your job. Does that mean you're going to leave me? No, that's not true. Becoming independent is like changing careers. It doesn't mean I won't have any money. You think going independent will work? I doubt it. Maybe you should go independent from me too. Huh? Are you talking about divorce? I won't support someone who's not working. My name is Lisa. I'm 40 years old. I've been working while raising my child. I didn't work after my daughter was born, but I was lucky to get my old job back when she started elementary school. I mainly work from home now. My daughter is in 6th grade, and I think it's time for me to try something new at work. My husband is also 40. When we married, he was a salesman with good prospects. He was confident in his job, but he switched jobs 3 years ago, hoping for a better salary. Instead, his salary went down, his benefits are worse, and he has to work overtime every day. My family lives on a farm in the countryside. My daughter has been helping them in the field since she was little. She loves visiting and working with her grandparents. My parents love doing field work with my daughter, but my husband hates the countryside and never wants to visit my parents' house. I'm going back to my parents' house for a week. How about you? I have work to do, so I'll stay here. I'm finishing up a project. I knew my husband wouldn't come, but we're a family, so I still ask. Even though he's not coming, it's polite to ask. When my daughter and I are at my parents' house, my husband calls me every day. It's fine if he's calling to check on us or show he cares, but he usually calls about trivial things. What should I eat today? Why not eat the leftovers in the fridge? I'm not in the mood for that. Then cook something yourself. Why should I? I'm tired. Yeah, you've worked hard. Where are my clothes? They're in your usual drawer. What's with the folding and cut corners? Well, you're on your own then. My husband has been like this the whole time we've been at my parents' house, so I mostly ignore his calls and messages. He also doesn't like it when we go to my parents' house. When we get back, the house is always filled with garbage. Mom, when we go to Grandpa's house, it always gets so messy. Yes, it does. Why do you always clean up the mess, Mom? He's the one making it. Shouldn't he clean up after himself? Of course. My daughter is also frustrated with my husband's attitude. Even though we're enjoying Grandpa's house, I hate coming home to a dirty house. My daughter feels the same way. Hey, can we leave early from Grandpa's house? Grandpa and Grandma must be tired from working in the fields. I wish I could help out. Thank you. Grandpa and Grandma would love that. My daughter's kindness is a contrast to my husband's selfish behavior. I'm really tired of dealing with his childish ways. After a long vacation, I went to my company to discuss my health, annual assessments, and goals. Inspired by my daughter's comments, I proposed to the president that we use our program to make agriculture more it-oriented. Other companies have been working on this for a while. The president agreed that this is a business that has been around overseas for decades. Japanese companies have been developing new agricultural models for about 10 years. With our data, we can make it work successfully. We already have farmers interested in this model. I see. In the meantime, can you submit a proposal? Sure, I will. I quickly asked my parents to cooperate, and they agreed right away. My daughter's comments about wanting to help her hardworking grandparents gave me a great business idea. A month after I submitted the proposal, my project was approved. I worked hard on it because I was worried about my aging parents. If the project succeeded, it would really help them. But my husband kept trying to discourage me. You've been acting all cheerful lately. I don't like it. Oh, really? Are you getting carried away? I don't know. Your face just demotivates me. Well, if that's the case, you don't have to look at me. I know my husband just wants to make me feel bad. I already feel bad enough, but I try not to show it. I keep my tone normal and treat him as usual. He's always like this. When I'm happy or excited, he tries to hurt me. I'm used to it now, so I don't let it affect me, but it's still frustrating. I can't just not look at you. We live together. That's not true. You can just stay in your room. I can handle my job and take care of our daughter on my own. If you took care of yourself, we wouldn't even need to interact. That's not what I meant. My husband yelled at me. I'm really frustrated. I want to divorce him, but I'm not sure how to explain it to our daughter. I'm stuck, unable to decide. Since I don't react to his words, he starts criticizing the farm. Maybe your inability to understand things is because you grew up on a farm in the countryside. He's being so childish. I try to stay calm, but when he insults my parents, it really gets to me. Still, I'm keeping a cool head this time. For the first time, a project I propose has been accepted, and I'm excited to work on it. My husband's attitude isn't bothering me as much as it used to. So, you're saying I can't do my job because I grew up in the city? You're crossing the line. That's exactly what I'm going to say to you. Don't be a jerk. No, you were the one who started this. We've been arguing like this a lot lately. He used to be a nice guy, but things changed when he switched jobs. My husband and I hadn't been getting along, but my work has been going really well. A few months later, I decided to resign from the company after discussing it with them. I made the choice to leave and sign a licensing agreement with the company to become independent. I had told my husband about this plan beforehand, but I guess he didn't really listen because as soon as I resigned, he told me he wanted a divorce. You quit your job. Does that mean you're going to live off me? No, that's not true. Becoming independent is like changing careers. It doesn't mean I won't have any income. You're going independent? Are you kidding me? That's not going to work. Then why don't you go independent from me too? Huh? Divorce? I'm talking about divorce. I'm not going to support someone who isn't working. I was at a loss for words, startled by the sudden mention of divorce. I was thinking about my daughter when she unexpectedly opened the living room door. Mom, get a divorce, she said, even though she should have been asleep. My husband looked briefly upset but quickly defended himself. It's your fault for saying you're quitting your job. He stood in front of our daughter, insisting it wasn't his fault. But my daughter only looked at me, ignoring him completely. Are you sure? I asked her. Yes, I want you to get a divorce. I don't like him. He always says mean things to you, Mom. Don't stay with him because of me. I want you to divorce him right now. We can go live with Grandpa and Grandma. Thank you, I said, touched by her support. But you'll have to change schools. Are you okay with that? Yeah, I'm totally fine with it. Let's go. You don't have to talk to Dad anymore, right? Yeah, I guess so. Well, I guess that's it. We'll talk about the details later. Hey, my husband interrupted. What? I replied, exhausted. It's not my fault, okay? Okay, we'll talk later. I hope you can live a life you won't regret in the future. Huh, I'm not gonna regret it. I'll be free once you guys are gone. I turned my back on my husband, who was still ranting, and left the house with my daughter. Despite my worries, my daughter seemed relaxed at my parents' house. She'd adjusted well after changing schools for the new semester and seemed to be enjoying her new environment. Once she was settled, my husband and I had another discussion about the divorce. He claimed he wouldn't pay alimony because, according to him, I was to blame. Normally, if it were my fault, he'd ask for alimony, but he clearly didn't understand what being liable meant. I will properly charge you alimony, I told him. Huh? Because you're the one who's liable, right? You're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. How can I be liable? I didn't do anything. Exactly, you didn't do anything about the house or our daughter. I was the one struggling while you did nothing, but you sure took care of Mary, didn't you? What? He stammered as I laid out the evidence of his infidelity on the table. How did you get this? You didn't steal my phone, did you? You're being rude. Excuse me? You're the rude one. You're a married man. What were you thinking? And no, I didn't collect this myself. Then how did you get it? You're unemployed. How did you afford a detective? It was our daughter, I revealed. Huh. She's the one who collected all of this. After we separated, she told me she saw you walking arm in arm with a woman she didn't know. She used my laptop to sync your phone and showed me the data. She even encouraged me to divorce you. She hates you. She hates that you're her father. So I can divorce you without a second thought, I said, feeling a mix of anger and relief. I can't believe you let our daughters see those pictures. You're such a lousy father. I laid out all the evidence in front of him. There's no point in making excuses. Your new job was the result of another affair, and you're already paying alimony to that woman's husband. You even lied about your salary being reduced, and I've looked into all of it. At that point, my husband, who had been stubborn and defensive, finally nodded, realizing he was caught. I'm proud to have such a talented daughter, he said, trying to shift the conversation. I'd be happy if she takes over my company in the future, if that's what she wants. Sorry, he muttered. Sorry isn't enough. Let's not avoid the divorce. You don't want to be unemployed, do you? I'm not stopping the divorce. And if you don't pay alimony and child support in a lump sum, I'll go to your company and tell them everything. If you do that, I won't be able to keep my job, he pleaded. Maybe you should start looking for a new one then, I said, standing firm. You're going to regret this for the rest of your life, he threatened. But I knew I wouldn't. My husband tried to ask me for help, but I just smiled and brushed him off. After that, he was reluctant to sign the divorce papers, so I hired a lawyer and let him handle everything. Less than 2 weeks later, we were divorced. My husband didn't want to spend any more money since he was already dealing with 2 alimony cases and paying child support. He knew that hiring a lawyer would push him to the brink of bankruptcy. In the end, my ex-husband paid alimony and child support in one lump sum. He couldn't cover it with his savings, so he went into debt and even informed me, hoping I'd feel sorry for him, but I ignored his pleas. When I filed a claim for alimony against his cheating partner, it led to a huge fight between them, and they broke up. The woman was furious about having to pay alimony, but she eventually agreed. She had to ask her parents for the money, and I heard she moved back to the countryside to help with the family business, where her parents could keep a close eye on her. As for my ex-husband, he couldn't afford the rent on his apartment anymore. He ended up moving into a shabby apartment, struggling to get by. My business has really taken off, and I'm enjoying every day. Things didn't work out with my husband, but I'm glad that what I've learned has been useful for my family's farming business. My parents are thrilled that the IT system has significantly reduced their work hours and lightened their workload. I owe so much of this success to my daughter. I had to let her have a smartphone and tablet when she was in elementary school. At first, I was hesitant, but she's been using them wisely. Her favorite place is still the fields, but she's starting to take an interest in my work. Recently, she's been asking me to teach her how to make a website, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for her. My 12-year-old daughter is truly remarkable, but it saddens me that she had to see a side of her father that no child should have to witness. I hope the adults around her will support and guide her as she grows. Her grandmother is right. I look forward to seeing the amazing things she'll do in the future. My mother-in-law went on a rant when she heard we were adopting. She said she couldn't bear the idea of Nancy's biological child being her first grandchild. She even suggested divorcing my husband and then adopting, or sending the child to foster care. But I'm Nancy, and I won't abandon my brother-in-law's child just to please her. So fine, I'll do what she wants. I'm 45 years old and recently moved to the countryside, where I used to live as a child. With remote work being so common now, I can live wherever I want. My allergies were awful in the city, but they've calmed down here with the cleaner air. Country life might not be for everyone, but it suits me just fine. Sure, the nearest supermarket is far and the houses are spread out, but I love the open space. I used to think city life was a pain when I was in my late 20s. Back then, I had just married Ken, and we were really close. But there was a big problem. Ken's mom was way too attached to him. It makes sense, since he's her only child. She'd call his work just to talk to him, and she'd hassle his girlfriends like crazy. She did a lot of weird stuff out of love for her son. Ken was really bothered by her when we were dating. He kept me a secret from her to protect me from what he called the evil queen. He was worried she'd treat me like she treated his exes. But once we got married, I couldn't stay hidden. Ken finally told her about me, and her reaction was intense. I heard her on the phone saying, "Let me meet her. If she's no good, I'll put her in her place." She must have felt shocked. She thought her son was all hers, and then suddenly there's a new woman he wants to marry. Why did I marry a man with such a mother? Simple. I loved him. That was the only reason. When I was sick, he'd take care of me, making me porridge and shedding tears at sappy movies. He even helped lost kids find their parents, even if it meant being late for our plans. He might not always seem competent, but deep down, he's really kind. That's what I adore about him, and why I wanted to be with him. So no matter how difficult his mother might be, I was ready to face her. Loving couples overcome obstacles, and in the end, they live happily ever after. That's the classic tale. But don't worry. When I met her for the wedding, she immediately threw a vase at me, shouting, "You thief cat." Can you believe people actually say thief cat? I was prepared, but her attack caught me off guard. A woman who never acknowledged me during our dating days didn't seem fit to judge. My son deserves someone better. I won't accept an orphan as my daughter-in-law, she went on. Yes, it's true, I don't have parents, My dad passed when I was in high school and my mom died when I was 20. I don't come from any special background, and by the time you hit your 40s or 50s, most people have lost their parents. Using that as a reason to disapprove of our marriage was just wrong. Luckily, my father-in-law stood up to her. You can't judge someone's character just based on their past. It's rude. Ken is old enough to make his own decisions. Just let him marry, he argued. But my mother-in-law isn't one to easily listen to her husband. In the end, she never officially accepted our marriage, so we secretly tied the knot on her father-in-law's advice. Even if we waited forever, she'd never give her blessing. I wanted to be with my husband in this life and the next. But that didn't mean I'd give up on our marriage in this life. I was ready to live as a married couple without ever telling my mother-in-law. A few months after we got married, we unexpectedly ran into her while shopping. Both of us proudly wore our engagement and wedding rings on our left hands. We were completely wrapped up in our newly bliss, happily strolling hand in hand while shopping, much to my mother-in-law's annoyance. She instantly caught sight of our rings and erupted into a tirade right there in the middle of the supermarket, oblivious to the curious glances from other shoppers. It turned out she'd been told by my father-in-law that we had called off our marriage and broken up. Neither my husband nor I knew about this story. Apparently, my father-in-law had shared it on his own. Feeling betrayed by both her husband and her son, my mother-in-law was livid. While I understood my father-in-law's intention to protect us, I couldn't help but regret not coordinating our story better to avoid such an easily uncovered lie. It must have hurt her deeply to be deceived in such a way. Her grip on my husband tightened, and despite his attempts to distance himself, she refused to let go. She began showing up at our doorstep daily, and eventually she moved in without so much as returning to her own home. Why did we allow her entry, you wonder? Well, each day she'd ring the doorbell, shouting through the thin walls, "Let me in. Are you planning to leave me out in the cold?" We had no choice but to let her in, at least temporarily. We attempted to remove her from our home several times, but she would always go to the police, claiming, "My son and his wife kicked me out." Feeling sympathetic toward the authorities, I decided to handle this family matter privately, although I had no clue how to deal with it. Despite numerous arguments and my husband's repeated demands for her to leave, she stubbornly refused. In fact, she seemed to relish the idea of being disliked. If she could wear us down and make us give up, it would be a victory for her, so she put all her energy into it. Her harassment toward me escalated. She would throw away my things without asking and ruin my cooking by pouring vinegar into it, making it inedible. These were just the beginning. What shocked me most was the garbage she left out. I discovered bags marked with "stupid" at the collection site. When I turned them around, I found "Nancy Thief Cat" written on the other side, forcing me to flip them again. At first, my father-in-law would visit daily, hoping to take her home, but eventually he stopped coming. My husband, too, became too busy and exhausted from arguing with his mother. Instead of insisting she leave, he started ignoring her. He even told me, "Don't bother cooking for my mom. Pretend she's not here." It was disheartening to see my kind husband pushed to this point, a testament to my mother-in-law's tenacity. Initially hurt by her son's neglect, she seemed determined to drive us apart. She shamelessly continued living in our home. Then one day we received devastating news. My brother and his wife had tragically died in a car accident while out with their family. Losing my supportive brother and kind sister-in-law was incredibly painful. But I couldn't afford to just wallow in grief. They left behind a 5-year-old son, Kyle. At the funeral and wake, relatives were passing around responsibility, asking, "Who will take care of him?" Nancy would be the best option. But what if Nancy refuses? Despite feeling somewhat distant from these relatives, their callousness was unsettling. I had always cherished Kyle as my first nephew and felt a strong bond with him, wanting to care for him if possible. But I worried about the impact on him of losing his parents and then being taken in by his aunt and uncle. Most importantly, I feared my husband's reaction. However, before I could even broach the subject, my husband said, "If Kyle doesn't mind, let's take him in ourselves." Kyle expressed his desire to live with us, so I decided to formally adopt him as my son. What about this child? On the day I brought Kyle home, my mother-in-law stared at him expressionlessly. My husband stayed silent, so I spoke up. "He's my nephew. We're going to raise him as our son." With the knowledge of my brother and his wife's passing, my mother-in-law seemed to grasp the situation from just that one sentence. "You're bringing in that child?" she questioned. "Yes, we're moving forward with the adoption process." "Adoption, can you believe it? That child is Nancy's blood relative. I can't bear the thought of such a child becoming my first grandchild. Get a divorce and then adopt him, or better yet, send him to a foster home." Suddenly, my mother-in-law erupted in anger, leaving poor Kyle bewildered by her outburst. "Why do we need your approval to care for this child? Please don't meddle in our marriage." "Absolutely not. That child would become my first grandchild, right? A child who doesn't share a drop of Ken's blood. I will never accept that," she declared, hurling the remote control at us. In an instant, my husband rushed to shield Kyle from the impact. "Kyle will simply be our adopted son, and nothing changes between him and you," I reassured her, but it felt like speaking to someone who refused to listen. "She's not against Kyle being adopted. She just can't stand the fact that we're still married," my husband muttered, his tone filled with frustration. "Well, if that's what she wants," my husband and I nearly said simultaneously that day, understanding that staying in that house wouldn't be good for Kyle. We decided to leave and move to a hotel. It's frustrating to have to leave our own home, but it's for Kyle's well-being. We see it as a temporary inconvenience until we can finally find a way to remove my mother-in-law from our lives for good. A week later, my husband and I finally returned home. It seemed even my stubborn mother-in-law was concerned, as we hadn't been back for a while. There was a moment of relief on her face when she saw us, followed by a smile. It seemed she was pleased that Kyle wasn't with us. "You've given up on the adoption," she said cheerfully. Neither my husband nor I replied as we quietly made our way to the living room. "You two went ahead with a marriage against my wishes, and now an adoption. That's just absurd. But at least you've come to your senses," she muttered to herself. My husband sat silently, taking several pamphlets out of his bag and laying them out in front of her. "Choose any place you like," he said. She was taken aback by the pamphlets and my husband's words. "What's this? What do you mean? You told us to choose between divorce or a facility, correct?" "Well, we've chosen a facility for you," my husband and I said with sly smiles, causing her expression to stiffen. She looked at my husband in panic, but he responded coldly. "Do you think we're joking? I'm dead serious. I'm only in my 60s. I can't go to a facility. And remember how you hid my belongings, despite me telling you not to," I added. She didn't know how to respond to my accusation. "That was just a mistake. It's a sign of dementia," she stuttered. "Also, you always make a mess of the room after I've tidied it up," my husband chimed in. Her expression tightened. "I'm getting older, so that's not acceptable. It could be an early sign of dementia, losing the ability to tidy up or starting to collect junk. And Mom, you've been hoarding items from that pop star. Those are just useless junk, right?" I remarked. "Well, that's another sign of progressing dementia," my husband chimed in. As we confronted her, she burst out, "What's gotten into you two? You gave us the choice between divorce or a facility, so we chose the facility." Right on cue, the doorbell rang. "Looks like they're here," my husband said casually. I nodded and hurried to the door, where my father-in-law stood waiting. "Sorry for the delay," he apologized. Observing the scene, my mother-in-law looked bewildered and asked, "Why is he here?" With a mischievous grin, my husband quipped, "Since it was either divorce or a facility, let's go with divorce." Caught off guard by my father-in-law's sudden mention of divorce, she was left speechless. Nobody specified whose divorce or whose stay in the facility. "We decided it's your divorce and your move to the facility." "Why do I always end up being the scapegoat?" she muttered as my father-in-law began to argue, insisting that she wasn't at fault. "My dear, it seems you've abandoned everything, including our home, and caused nothing but trouble for our son," my father-in-law scolded. "I've repeatedly told you to come back home, stop bothering our son, and take care of the house." "What are you saying, acting like some old-fashioned dictator? Take care of the house yourself," she snapped. "Of course I am, but you've taken on too much, like all that community work, right? Your absence has left the house empty, and now I'm left handling everything." "Naturally, I have complaints," my father-in-law fired back. Yes, my mother-in-law, who once relished being a stay-at-home mom, seemed to have overloaded herself with community responsibilities, like paperwork and event planning. Since she started neglecting her duties at home, I chimed in. Not wanting to burden the community association, my father-in-law has been struggling to juggle both his job and the tasks she left unfinished. He stopped fetching her because he got too wrapped up in community affairs, my husband explained. I'm exhausted by all this. It's becoming overwhelming. You need to choose between divorce or going to a facility, I asserted. This can't be right. I'm not the one at fault here. I won't go to a facility, and I don't want a divorce. It feels like everything might fall apart just by being around you, she protested. Seeing my father-in-law's exhaustion, my mother-in-law seemed to realize that it was all coming to an end and simply hung her head. You've been plotting to divorce us, but you should cherish your husband. He's a human being too, and he might just divorce you. Oh wait, he is divorcing you. I chuckled. This must have irritated her, but she remained silent. Perhaps she no longer had the energy to argue. And so my in-laws divorced, and Kyle officially became our son. As we proceeded with the divorce process, my mother-in-law returned to her marital home. Meanwhile, my husband and I moved secretly with the assistance of my father-in-law. As of now, she hasn't been able to locate us. With limited finances and little knowledge of the internet, it's doubtful that my mother-in-law could track us down out of state. However, since the property originally belonged to my father-in-law's family, she was swiftly evicted and divorced. Apparently, during the chaos of the divorce, she had pleaded with my father-in-law not to divorce her, even begging on her knees, claiming she didn't want to divorce at her age. As a homemaker, she had no savings. She attempted to claim a portion of the assets, but since there wasn't much to begin with, she has been struggling to make ends meet on her own. Despite needing assistance, both my father-in-law and husband have distanced themselves from her. She attempted to rely on a distant cousin she hadn't been in touch with for years, only to be turned down with the explanation, "We can't afford to support another adult. You need to fend for yourself." She should seek employment instead of relying on others. But she has yet to do so. However, I'll keep that observation to myself. In the meantime, my husband and I have welcomed a daughter, Camila, into our family, and Kyle is thriving in his new home with us. Camila grew up believing Kyle was her biological brother until she reached junior high school. Although we've since revealed the truth to her, their bond remains unshaken. Kyle plays various roles in Camila's life. Sometimes a brother, sometimes a parental figure, always watching out for her. When a neighborhood boy bullied Camila in elementary school, it was Kyle who rushed to her aid first, not us. If Camila ever decides to marry, I'm sure Kyle will be even more discerning of her potential suitors than my husband. Kyle, who initially struggled to express affection, now affectionately calls me Mom and has grown particularly close to my husband, spending weekends fishing together. Honestly, I can't help but feel a twinge of envy at their bond. Kyle is the cherished child left behind by my dear brother and his wife, and I'm committed to nurturing him as my own for the rest of my days. Now, let's take a look at what the boys have caught and whip up a delicious dinner with my daughter. I'll put my homemaking skills to the test and impress everyone. Just kidding. This time, let your brother have a baby. You can have another one later. I told my parents I was pregnant. Then my mom said something shocking. Zach and his wife Rosie, who can't have kids, want us to give them our baby for adoption. My parents always favored Zach and ignored me. The happy future I imagined with my first baby turned into sadness. I'm Olivia. I've been married to Walt for 3 years. We're happy and thinking about having a baby soon. But I haven't been close to my family because of issues with my parents and brother Zach. In our family house, my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie all live together. Zach has been praised since he was little, excelling in school and landing a job at a big company, which he'll probably take over from Dad. Our parents have always adored him. I, on the other hand, didn't stand out academically and wasn't as good-looking, so I never felt that close to our parents. I often felt left out and lonely because Zach got so much attention. Mom especially favored him, always by his side and hardly ever paying attention to me. When she did talk to me, it was usually criticism. Zach followed Mom's lead and didn't treat me well either, so we never really got along. I felt like I didn't belong at home and became more and more isolated. Because of that, right after finishing high school, I moved out. My parents didn't seem bothered when I told them I was leaving. If anything, they seemed happy about it. After leaving, I found a job, and 3 years later, I married Walt, who was in the same class as me. I wanted to start my own family and find peace away from my parents' influence. I only go back home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I don't really want to, but my parents insist. They care a lot about appearances, and it wouldn't look good if their daughter never visited. So I put up with it and visit twice a year. I reluctantly went back this Thanksgiving, but my mother was as distant as ever. "You and your husband are still not that impressive," she said, dampening the festive atmosphere. She started being sarcastic right away. She only called us back to say such things. If she's going to be like this, she shouldn't even bother calling, I thought, trying to ignore her sarcasm. But she kept going. "We're worried about you. You two live so modestly. We always think you'll come asking for money. My family is pretty wealthy, but since I left, I've never asked for financial help. Walt and I manage fine on our own earnings. We even send them proper birthday gifts. We would never do that," I quickly replied to her unfounded accusation. Then she said, "But you two are still earning modestly, right?" and turned to look at Walt next to me. "Walt, you're still at that detective agency, right? How long do you plan to stick with that questionable job? Aren't you embarrassed?" Indeed, Walt works as a detective, something she always mocks. She sees detective work as sketchy and inferior to regular jobs. As Walt tried to explain his job to her, Zach jumped in. "Mom, there's no point in even listening to that. Detective work is shady, something nobody respectable does. It's a job for people beneath us. The pay must be peanuts compared to mine," showing off his superiority. Zach shared her disdain for detective work, a sentiment we've heard since we got married. Walt stayed quiet, but I felt upset that his job was being dismissed outright. Walt has always been my support, understanding what my family is like since our college days. That's why he always joins me when we visit my parents, not wanting to leave me alone, even though he knows it won't be pleasant. I still feel guilty about it. Like many visits before, this one ended on a sour note. Around that time, we decided to live modestly together, unaffected by my family's opinions. Something amazing happened in our 3rd year of marriage. I found out I was pregnant. I was thrilled to be expecting our first child. Knowing how my parents always put me down, I felt like I had to share the news with them, so I went to our family home to tell them. It had been a while since I visited outside of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie were all there, but their reaction to my announcement caught me off guard. When my mother heard the news, she suddenly got loud. "How could you say that in front of Zach?" Her response was unexpected. I wasn't expecting congratulations, but this was different. I was confused by her mentioning Zach, and when I looked puzzled, she dropped a bombshell. "Zach and Rosie can't have kids. How could you be so insensitive?" I had no clue they were dealing with infertility. Shocked by her words, I glanced at them. Zach seemed uncomfortable, and Rosie looked down sadly. "You're having a baby before Zach. If it wasn't for Rosie, this wouldn't be happening." My mother sighed dramatically, looking between Rosie and me. Seeing this, Zach stepped in. "Rosie already feels bad enough. Don't be too hard on her, Mom." I was surprised to hear him defend Rosie. From what I knew from my visits, Zach wasn't usually that supportive of her. "You're really kind, Zach." Then Zach said something that made me pause. "Rosie, if it weren't for being married to Zach, you would have been divorced by now." My mother shot Rosie a glare. Maybe despite everything, Zach does care about his wife. As I watched Zach calm our mother down, I thought about what had just happened. Well, I shared my news, so I should head home, I said, feeling the tension rise because of my announcement. But then my mother said something unbelievable. "Give your baby to Zach." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Give my baby to Zach. Why should I? I can have another baby if I want to. Just because Rosie can't have children doesn't mean I should give mine away. That's unfair and ridiculous. When I refused, my mother argued, "This is our first grandchild. It should be raised by us. Zach will take over the company, so we should raise the baby." Her words made me furious. She was planning to take my unborn child just to ensure a successor for our father's company. She talked about adoption like she had it all planned out, but I was too angry to listen. I was already irritated, and then Zach said something shocking. "Well, since Rosie can't have kids, it's good for her that you got pregnant. You're finally doing something for the family." I couldn't believe it, but Zach seemed to agree with my mom. Even Dad, who usually stays quiet, nodded along. It felt like the whole family was claiming my baby as their own. I couldn't believe how casually Zach spoke to his own wife like that, acting like it was no big deal. I realized there was no point in arguing further, so I left right away. All they said was, "Give us an answer next time you come," and didn't even come to say goodbye. Rosie, who must have been hurt, silently watched me leave. Even after I got home, I couldn't shake off my anger. Instead of celebrating my pregnancy, they made this unreasonable demand. I felt gloomy thinking about the future. They'd probably keep pushing for adoption even after the baby was born. When I told Walt what happened after he got back from work, he was shocked too. Even he couldn't find the words to respond. He knows my family, but this was beyond belief. A few days later, we were surprised by an unexpected visitor at home. "What brings you here all of a sudden?" "It's rare to see you alone," I said to Rosie. She looked tired, with dull skin and messy hair. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at us. "Olivia, I'm really sorry about what happened the other day," she said, referring to when I announced my pregnancy. It wasn't her fault, but she seemed burdened by the unreasonable demands my family had made. Then she said she had something important to discuss. "What is it?" I asked, inviting her in to talk. What she told me was shocking, and my anger flared up again. Trying to stay calm, she shared a significant truth with me. Walt had been quietly listening to our conversation, and then chimed in with something equally astonishing and infuriating. Rosie's tears started again as she listened to Walt. With this new information from both of them, I made a decision. I vowed to myself to hold my parents and Zach accountable, to settle past grievances and seek justice. 3 months later, with my belly starting to show, Walt and I visited my family home. My parents, Zach and Rosie, were there. Without even a greeting, my mother asked, "You've decided to give the baby to Zach, right?" It seemed like she couldn't think of anything else. As I said before, that's not happening. I replied, but my parents glared at me as if they couldn't accept it. "No matter what you say, we're taking that baby. Stop being stubborn," my mother said, clearly angered by my refusal. Zach and my father just watched, not intervening. "No matter how much you insist, I'll never give the baby away. But I came here today to show you something." "Is that okay, Rosie?" I asked, looking at Rosie, who nodded silently. Rosie intends to divorce Zach, and this is why. I pulled out some photos from an envelope I had brought. That was the reason for my visit today. Zach was speechless as he looked at the photos. They clearly showed him kissing another woman and entering a hotel. Undeniable proof of his infidelity. "Shocked to have been caught," he muttered. "Who took these photos?" Our parents, standing next to Zach, looked bewildered, their gaze shifting between him and me. They probably had no idea about his affair. "It was Walt who took these," I said. Walt, who had been silently observing, explained how he had come across the photos. As a detective, he had seen Zach with another woman while working on a case. Out of curiosity, he investigated further and found out about Zach's affair. The decisive moment was captured in those photos, as Zach thought he had cleverly hidden his affair. He was stunned and speechless. "Adultery is grounds for divorce. You need to compensate Rosie properly," I said, breaking the tense silence. But Zach, instead of apologizing, blamed Rosie for his actions. "Yeah, it's your fault, Rosie. You're so incompetent. I'm just having a little fun outside," he said, with our mother backing him up, trying to shift the blame away from Zach. Seeing Rosie treated like I once was made me feel terribly sorry for her. So I decided to confront my family to save both of us. I pushed them further by pointing out Zach's faults. "Zach, you mocked Walt, but a professional detective's skills are extraordinary." Evidence kept piling up as soon as he started investigating. "And we found out something shocking about your mistress," I said, watching my parents tense up, wondering what would come next. "The woman you're seeing seems to be the daughter of a mafia boss," I revealed, watching Zach freeze in shock. He must not have known that. My mother screamed, "What? Is that true?" Upon hearing the revelation, she collapsed to the ground, covering her face, while my father looked terrified. "Zach, you were pretending to be single, right?" I asked, and Zach started to panic. "No, I didn't know either." Our parents, who had been so authoritative just moments ago, were now completely bewildered by this unexpected revelation. Then Rosie spoke up amidst the confusion. "You didn't just deceive your mistress, did you?" Her words brought tension back into the room. She repeated what she had told me during her visit. "You're infertile, aren't you?" Zach's face betrayed a look of realization. Our parents stared at him in shock. They had blamed Rosie for their infertility issues, but the truth was it was Zach himself. "Did you know, Rosie?" That was all he could manage to say. Our stunned parents struggled to find their next words, visibly shaken by the revelation. Rosie delivered the final blow. "I found out accidentally while cleaning the room." She had stumbled upon his infertility diagnosis hidden in his desk drawer. Unable to admit it to his loving parents, Zach had kept this fact a secret and blamed Rosie for their infertility. Believing his words, our parents had unfairly blamed Rosie. His protective comments about Rosie when I announced my pregnancy were probably driven by his guilt over the issue. Blamed for something she had no control over, Rosie suffered every day. As the conversation turned to the topic of taking my child, Rosie spoke with a calm, unchanged expression. Meanwhile, my parents, just learning the shocking truth, were in a panic. "To think Zach will never have a child, that's just..." My mother began, despairing at the thought of not having a grandchild. But then she turned her hysterical anger towards him. "You knew it was your fault, yet you blamed your wife. Did you cheat because you knew you were infertile? How come my son stooped so low? Oh dear, why did this happen?" She vented her frustration at him. Finally, Zach spoke, offering a pitiful explanation. "I was shocked to find out I was infertile. I felt guilty for not giving you a grandchild. When I found out Olivia was pregnant with a boy, it just seemed convenient." His words filled me with contempt. Pushing aside my anger, I delivered the final blow to the three of them. "Your selfish actions hurt Rosie and me. And Zach, you had an affair with such a dangerous person. Mom and Dad, you'll have to face the consequences of your actions. You've hurt so many people, now it's time to face the music." My words prompted them to apologize, their earlier bravado gone. Where did that confidence go when you asked me to give up my son? I looked at them with disdain, feeling as though I was looking at garbage. Beside me, Rosie remained silent, her gaze fixed ahead, silently conveying the depth of her sorrow. Tough times lay ahead for Zach and my parents. When the father of Zach's mistress discovered the affair, they were summoned and forced to apologize repeatedly. Despite ending the affair, Zach had to pay a hefty compensation for deceiving the woman. The amount was staggering, teaching them the harsh consequences of getting involved with such people. As a result, our family home descended into chaos. My father had to step down as company president due to the public scandal, and my mother became isolated, shunned by the neighbors, and withdrawing into herself. Their relationship became hostile, constantly arguing over Zach's actions. Zach lost his job after the scandal reached his company, and to add to his troubles, his divorce with Rosie was finalized. Struggling with unemployment and financial burdens, Zach found himself trapped in a cycle of relentless work. Around the time Rosie successfully left the family home, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Both the baby and I were in good health, and I reveled in the joy of welcoming new life. Our family of three embarked on happy days together. Eventually, Walt and I made the decision to sever all ties with my family. Although I have been torn about cutting off contact with my parents and brother, that incident made me realize it was the best decision for my son's well-being. Despite their absence, I have found solace and love in my irreplaceable family. From now on, I choose to cherish only my precious family. Hi, I'm Kirsten, and I'm 44 years old. Thanks for picking my story. I hope you find it either insightful or really entertaining. I certainly didn't expect what happened to me. I've always been close to my friends, especially Trisha, my best friend since college. We met back when we were 20 and 19, and we've been inseparable ever since. We had big dreams of living next door to each other and raising our kids together. And you know what? We actually made it happen. We worked hard in college, found great partners, and bought houses right next to each other, just like we planned. Before we knew it, Trisha and I were both expecting babies around the same time. It was a funny coincidence as we got pregnant just a couple of months apart. It wasn't exactly what we had planned, but it added an extra thrill to our journey. Life was pretty good for us. Trisha felt like more than just a friend. She was like a twin flame or a sister I never knew I had. We did everything together and genuinely cared for each other. As the years passed by, our bond only grew stronger. Our kids were growing up too, and Kyler and Ricky especially became inseparable, just like us. They didn't really have a choice. Trisha and I were so close, they had to get along. Trisha's husband and I even joked about whether our kids would end up falling in love when they grew up. Trisha and I thought it was unlikely, but life has a funny way of surprising you. I remember that day so clearly, like it just happened. Trisha and I were sitting on her porch, chatting away about everything, as best friends do. Suddenly, Ricky and Kyler walked up the driveway, and there was something different about them. It struck me when I saw them holding hands. Ricky was 19 and Kyler was 18, and it seemed like that was the moment they decided to be officially together. Trisha and I were surprised, but apparently, their friends and even their cousins had seen it coming for a while. "Hey, you two, how was your day?" "Wait, what's going on here?" Kyler and Ricky both took a deep breath and then spilled the news. "Mom, Aunt Trisha, Ricky, and I are officially a couple." "What? Really? Oh, that's fantastic news, you two. I knew something was up when you walked up the driveway holding hands like that." "Yeah, we decided to make it official. We've been keeping it quiet for a while now. Looks like our husbands were right, huh?" "Seems that way. But seriously, congratulations, you two. We're so happy for you." "Thanks, Aunt Kirsten. It means a lot. We were a bit nervous about how you guys would react." "Sweetheart, you should have told us sooner. We're thrilled for both of you." "Absolutely, you don't need to worry. We're here to support you, just like always." "We appreciate that, Aunt Kirsten, and we're really glad you guys are okay with it. And who knows, maybe our kids will grow up together just like we did. We might even start placing bets on when they'll become a couple." "Let's not rush things now. Let's just celebrate this beautiful moment." "Sounds good to me. Thanks, Mom, Aunt Trisha, for being so cool about it." "Always, sweetheart. Love knows no schedule. We're just happy you found each other." It felt like destiny had brought Kyler and Ricky together. Trisha and I were thrilled for our kids. However, things took a turn when they were on a school trip, and Trisha and I were hanging out at my place. Out of the blue, Trisha asked, "Hey, Chris, have you ever thought about whether our kids should really be together?" I knew there was more to it, but she brushed it off. Despite my persistence, she avoided the topic and made excuses to leave early. It bothered me, but I let it slide. Over the years, Trisha's unease around Kyler and Ricky's affection became obvious. I couldn't ignore it any longer. "Trisha, what's really going on?" She denied any issue, but I could sense her discomfort. I confronted her, urging her to open up. Despite her denial, I reassured her of my support and urged her not to shut me out. She insisted everything was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. Once Ricky and Kyler announced their engagement, the chaos of wedding planning began. We threw ourselves into organizing the big day, but Trisha's involvement was noticeably lacking. She made excuses, leaving me to handle most of the responsibilities. While Trisha's behavior wasn't entirely unexpected, it surprised Ricky and Kyler. They assumed Trisha and I would be inseparable in the planning process. Instead, it felt like I was managing everything alone. Trisha's increasing distance became more obvious as time passed, and Ricky started confiding in me about her unusual reactions. Every time Kyla came up, he couldn't shake the feeling that Trisha wasn't entirely happy about their marriage. "Have you talked to her about it?" "Yeah, I have. She keeps insisting that everything's fine when I know it's not. I don't understand why she's acting so strangely. Despite our concerns about Trisha, we had a wedding to plan, and there was no time to dwell on her negativity." Ricky and Kila were excited to celebrate their love, and ensuring their special day went smoothly became my top priority. The anticipation for the wedding day was intense after weeks of careful planning. Despite our efforts, Trisha, who had been mysteriously absent leading up to the big day, seemed to cause unexpected disruptions. Each accidental spill or dropped item added to the chaos, and the timing seemed too coincidental to ignore. It just seems too convenient, don't you think? As we gathered in Kila's dressing room with the other bridesmaids, I found myself constantly shuttling between there and the venue, balancing the exhilarating responsibility of organizing the event with the exhaustion it brought. While making my rounds around the venue, I paused at the door of Kila's dressing room. The voices inside were quiet, and my curiosity got the best of me. Kyla was talking to Trisha, and it seemed like the other bridesmaids were out of the room too. "What's going on, Trisha? You've been scarce, and your behavior. It's been strange." As I listened in, hoping for an honest conversation, what I heard stunned me. Trisha opened up, revealing her true feelings, and they weren't good. She was unhappy with Kila, criticizing her decisions and questioning if she was suitable for Ricky. It hit me hard. My lifelong best friend seemed to harbor serious negativity towards Kayla. I've never approved of you, Kayla. Do you think you were raised properly? Do you think you're worthy of my son? You don't deserve him. I hate that this is happening. How can you say that? I had no idea you felt this way. You must have known. I've been uncomfortable around you for a long time. Then why didn't you speak up? Why wait until my wedding day to unload all this? If you had a problem with me, why not talk to me instead of making me out to be the villain? Not a chance. I won't ruin my son's happiness because of my issues with you. Even if he doesn't see your value now, he will eventually. It was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe Trisha had been keeping these resentments hidden, and her odd behavior on the wedding day seemed to stem from these deep-seated disapprovals. The gravity of what I overheard hit me like a ton of bricks. Someone I trusted so much was concealing toxic emotions. The joyous occasion of the wedding now felt tainted by this unpleasant truth. Feeling stunned and wounded, I had to decide what to do. I barged into the room, only to find my daughter, tears streaking down her face. Seeing Kayla in distress ignited my anger, and I unleashed it on Trisha, demanding to know what her issue was. I was seething with fury, feeling betrayed and wounded by someone I consider family. What on earth is going on, Trisha? What's gotten into you? Are you out of your mind? Trisha seemed taken aback, probably not expecting my abrupt entrance. I didn't care. I needed answers. The atmosphere in the room was tense, with everyone else remaining silent, likely shocked by the sudden confrontation. But I paid no heed to their reactions. All that mattered was unraveling this mess and salvaging what was left of the wedding. Trisha, tell me what's happening. Why is my daughter crying on her wedding day? Kirsten, it's nothing really. Just some pre-wedding jitters. Jitters? Come on, Trisha. I heard your conversation in there. You can't deceive me. You've misunderstood, Kirsten. I was simply telling Kayla about the stresses of weddings, you know. Don't lie to me, Trisha. I heard you mention something about Ricky not deserving Kayla and ruining his life. What's that supposed to mean? Do you think I raised my daughter poorly? No, Kirsten, you've got it all wrong. I was just expressing concern, offering motherly advice. Motherly advice? Making my daughter cry is your idea of advice? Trisha, you're supposed to be my best friend. What kind of friend talks negatively about their bestie's daughter on her wedding day? Kirsten, I had no more excuses. Trisha, you've been a terrible friend, and I won't tolerate you ruining my daughter's special day. If you can't be happy for her, maybe you should leave. We continued arguing, and Kayla was attempting to fix her makeup. Eventually, Trisha left, embarrassed and unable to accept responsibility for her actions. It was truly eye-opening to witness. Why would she do this to me, Mom? What did I do? I don't know, sweetheart, but one thing's for sure. It's not your fault. Trisha's acting childish, and she's clearly envious of you. I mean, why bring this up now? Like you said, if she had a problem, she should have talked to you. But she knows her excuses for disliking you don't hold water, or else she wouldn't have behaved so terribly. Kayla shed a few more tears, and I reassured her that everything would be all right. Then, I had a sudden idea. I just thought of something. We're going to teach that woman a lesson, but only if you're okay with it, I said, seeking Kayla's approval. I outlined my plan to expose Trisha's true nature, which immediately lifted Kayla's spirits. She agreed it was a perfect plan and urged us to act swiftly to give Trisha a taste of her own medicine. With the plan in motion, we proceeded with the ceremony, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. Throughout the event, I kept an eye out for Trisha, who appeared increasingly uncomfortable. Good. I was pleased to see her squirm, but she was about to feel even more uncomfortable. As Kayla and Ricky exchanged vows, the atmosphere relaxed, and people began to enjoy the festivities. That's when I sprang into action. I approached the DJ booth and requested the microphone and controls for a few minutes, explaining that I had an important announcement to make. With determination, I took charge of the microphone, signaling for the music to stop. A hush fell over the room as all eyes turned to me. Trisha, standing in the corner, looked visibly nervous. I began by thanking everyone for being part of the special day, but hinted at an unfortunate revelation. Ricky looked puzzled as I addressed the room about Trisha's recent behavior. I described her negativity and expressed my disappointment. Recently, I discovered something that deeply saddened me. It turned out that my supposed best friend of 20 years had been nothing but cruel to my daughter, making her cry just moments before she walked down the aisle. Gasps filled the room, and Trisha looked shocked, but she was about to be even more surprised by what I had on her. The tension in the air was palpable as I believed I had undeniable proof of Trisha's actions. With a dramatic flair, I revealed an audio recording from my Bluetooth earpiece, capturing a conversation between Trisha and Keila. People gasped as the harsh words reverberated through the venue. You see, as the event planner, I wore an earpiece and carried a clipboard, bustling around the venue. I made it a habit to record my conversations so I could listen back later and plan the wedding accordingly. Even on the wedding day, this setting was still on, thank goodness. Without it, I wouldn't have the standing audio recording. Mom, is this true? Did you really say those things to her? I can explain. How could you do that to Keila on our wedding day? Ricky, honey, I didn't mean for things to escalate like this. I was just worried. Worried, Mom? Keila and I have been together for years. She's my partner, the love of my life. You had no right to question that on our wedding day. I know. There's no excuse. Do you really think you can talk about Keila like that and then act like everything's fine? Ricky, please try to understand. I didn't mean it. Trisha's face turned several shades of red as the recording played for everyone to hear. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Ricky's scowl deepened, clearly disgusted by his mother's behavior. The guests were stunned, many of them glaring at Trisha as I stopped the recording after letting it play a couple of times. The room fell into silence. You could hear a pin drop, and Trisha's nervous gulp was audible. How could you do this to me? You did it to yourself, Trisha. You're despicable, and I'm relieved to finally see it. I'll never forgive you for this. Fine, because we'll never forgive you either. Security, please escort her out. What? Why? You're really going to kick out your own mother? We'll discuss this later, Mom. I'm still deeply hurt. I think it's best if you leave. I can't believe this. You're trying to ruin my life. Believe it, Trisha. No one gets away with making my daughter cry. Now go. As the commotion settled and Trisha attempted to garner support from the crowd, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Part of me was furious, not just at Trisha, but also at myself for missing the signs earlier. I prided myself on being a vigilant and supportive mother, and failing to see Trisha's true nature for so long left me feeling terrible. Trisha tried to justify herself, but I wasn't interested. She had plenty of time to talk to me about whatever was bothering her. But she chose to do it on a day meant for joy and happiness, clinging to her excuses for as long as she could. Leave now, Trisha. Keila, Ricky, and I will listen to you when we're ready. She had months to come clean, but she chose to disrupt a day meant for celebration with her grievances. Determined to dispel the negativity and salvage the celebration, we pressed on with the festivities. Finally conceding defeat, Trisha chose not to further embarrass herself and cooperated with the security guards to leave. Despite feeling foolish for not seeing through Trisha's facade earlier, there was a strange sense of relief in finally seeing her true colors. Someone who deliberately tries to ruin a wedding, especially one involving their own family, lacks basic decency and empathy. After Trisha's departure, the wedding resumed. Although there was some lingering awkwardness, the genuine love and joy of Keila and Ricky helped to lift everyone's spirits. The couple radiated happiness, overshadowing the negativity Trisha had attempted to inject into their special day. As the hours passed, we continued to enjoy ourselves, despite Trisha's attempts to reach out to me through calls, all of which I declined. I sent her a firm text indicating that I wasn't ready to speak with her. Her actions towards my daughter on such an important day were unforgivable. Even Trisha's husband appeared visibly upset, choosing to leave the wedding early, presumably to have a serious conversation with her. I didn't know how things would unfold, nor did I particularly care. My priority was supporting Keila and Ricky, ensuring that despite the hiccup, their wedding day remained a cherished memory for them. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake off the anger and disappointment at Trisha's betrayal. I made a vow to shield my daughter from any future harm, even if it meant severing ties with someone I had considered a best friend for years. Trisha had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine, one that prioritized the happiness and well-being of my family over toxic relationships.